going to be distracted by the hype and the mania of the day. The housing bubble never would have existed without the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve brought interest rates down to an artificially low level. They brought it down to 1%. And then you had the government, through their entities, Fannie and Freddie, were guaranteeing mortgages, so that the people who were actually buying the Fannie and Freddie debt, who were lending money to Americans to buy houses, they really couldn't care if the money was paid back because the government was guaranteeing it. Meanwhile, because interest rates were so low, people were able to buy houses they couldn't afford, or, better way, they were able to overpay for houses. They were able to pay more than they were worth because the Fed made it possible through low interest rates for homeowners to make the teaser rates on their ARMs or their payments. But nobody was focusing on what was going to happen once interest rates rose, which I knew was inevitable. People didn't realize that the people who were borrowing this money had no chance of paying it back, and people didn't appreciate the gravity of the economic collapse once our lending institutions were revealed to be insolvent. Because they were, because all their assets were all these mortgages that people couldn't possibly pay back. And I knew that when interest rates rose and this bubble burst, that it would bring on a massive recession, because Americans were living beyond their means. We were spending money we didn't have. Everybody acted like they won the lottery. People that owned homes thought they were rich, and they thought they would keep making money as real estate prices kept rising. So I knew that when you took that away, that all the consumption would go. But my biggest fear when I wrote Crash Proof was that the government would respond to that crisis the way it had caused it. Remember, when Bush first came to office in 2000, he inherited a similar situation to Obama. He inherited a bursting NASDAQ bubble, stock market bubble, and we were having a recession. And his policy was to stimulate the economy, and that's why we had all the problems. It was the economic stimulus that was first introduced with Bush and Greenspan that created the problem. If the government would have done nothing and allowed the market to function, we would have had a steeper recession in 2001, 2002, but the economy would be in great shape today because we would have had a lasting recovery. Instead of letting the free market work, we interfered with government stimulus and we inflated the housing bubble. We got Americans to spend money that they didn't have to buy things they couldn't afford. We made it possible for Wall Street to gamble by giving them cheap money, and we created this problem. When this bubble burst, we now have Barack Obama and Ben Bernanke making all the same mistakes that we made under Bush and Greenspan, only bigger, because now the problem is bigger. So now they're doing an even bigger stimulus. And unfortunately, the economic crisis that we're in the process of creating is much worse than the one that we just lived through. Because what's going to happen as a result of all the money that's been printed to prop up companies that we should have let fail and to try to encourage Americans to spend more money, but what we really want them to do is save their money. You see, the recession is actually the market's way of curing the economy from the disease that the government inflicted it with. The problem with our economy is we all spend too much, we don't save enough. We consume too much, but we don't make enough. And so the economy needs to restructure so that we produce more, and we can't do that until we save more. So we have to stop spending. People have to stop buying cars and have to stop buying houses. That's the only way they can replenish their savings. That's the only way we can get real economic growth. But the government doesn't want that. The government just wants phony growth that will temporarily make people believe that the economy is growing so that the incumbent politicians can get reelected. And so what they've done is they've done the same thing. They've shot us up with this stimulus. And all the money that they've printed is going to cause the value of the money that exists to collapse. So we had a financial crisis the first time around. Now we're going to have a currency crisis. That currency crisis could come as early as 2010, this year. But it might not hit till 2011 or 2012. But when it does, the consequences are going to be devastating. It's going to be much worse than what we lived through in 2008. Because the value of our money is going to fall dramatically. That's going to send consumer prices up dramatically. Right now, oil is about $84 a barrel. It's risen sharply in the last year. But in the currency crisis, oil can be $200 a barrel. It can be $300 a barrel. It can be more. And it's not just oil. It's food that's going to go up dramatically in price. The price of everything we want to buy is going to go up. In addition, long-term interest rates will go up dramatically as well. And so now you're going to have the same problems we have now. We're going to be in this huge recession. But we're going to have rising prices and rising interest rates, which are going to make it a lot worse. And unfortunately, by the time this currency crisis hit, there's going to be a lot more people unemployed than there are today. Because the government is trying to pretend that there's an economic recovery going on. There's not. We're not recovering from anything. We're spending more borrowed money. We're going deeper into debt. but the fundamentals of the economy are getting worse. So we're going to continue to lose jobs. Jobs come from two things. They come from profits and they come from capital. Without capital, there are no jobs. The capital is the equipment, the tools that an employer allows people to use. But capital comes from savings. You're not going to get any capital if people aren't saving. Nobody in this country is saving. There's no return on savings. The interest rates are much too low. Capital is fleeing the country because there's much better opportunity outside the United States. And then, of course, you need a profit incentive. But small businesses can't make a profit now. Whatever profits they have are going to be regulated away or taxed away. And I said, I started my business out of my one-bedroom apartment. It's impossible for me to do that today. I have, out of my 100 employees, I've got 7 employees. And the only thing these people do is comply with government regulations. That's the only reason I hired them. The regulations are meaningless. They do nothing to help my clients. All they do is make my business less efficient. Now, some people might think, well, at least we created these 7 jobs. We didn't. If I didn't have to hire these 7 people, I could have 200 people working for me right now. We created 7 inefficient jobs that made everybody else less productive. But the meantime is, the amount of money I have to pay these people, if I had to start from scratch today, I couldn't do it. I couldn't afford the expense. All these new regulations have been put on the financial industry since 2000. It is so much more complicated now. We are encumbered with regulation, yet the government says that the reason we had a financial crisis was because there wasn't enough regulation on financial institutions. There's plenty of regulation on those institutions. There's more than we need. The problem is it was government regulation that eliminated the free market regulation that would have prevented all this stuff from happening. The free market would have reined in all the greed. But because of government moral hazard introduced through their regulation, we had all these problems. But more regulations are not going to make our economy more efficient. They're going to make our economy less efficient. And so small businesses like mine are going to have a hard time expanding because they can't do it because of the cost of business. And also you have the healthcare mandates and cap and trade and whatever else they're doing. All of that is increasing the cost of doing business, making businesses less efficient and less productive. They're not going to expand. They're going to contract. They're going to do whatever they can to survive the attack that's coming from Washington. And unfortunately, because of what happened under Bush, because so much damage was done while we were pretended to be, believe in free markets or believe in capitalism, we really gave the Democrats a window of opportunity to grow government because they're able to blame the problems on George Bush and say, you see, that's what happens when you follow capitalism, but he didn't do that. They don't explain that Barack Obama is pursuing the Bush agenda. He's just doing it on a bigger scale, but we never had free markets. We never had capitalism. If we had that, we wouldn't be in this mess. So to sum it up, the reason that I'm running, the reason I want to go to Washington is, number one, to prevent the damage from getting any greater. There's not a person in the Senate right now that has any clue what's wrong with this economy. They don't understand their part in creating the economic crisis. And when the next one hits, they're going to be just as clueless. And they're going to respond to it the same way they responded now. They're going to say that the market's the problem. Gee, we just didn't have enough regulation. We just need a bigger stimulus. And they're going to keep doing the same thing over and over again until they completely destroy the economy and destroy the currency. So somebody's got to be there to put a stop to it. Somebody that understands it, and somebody that has a track record, at least, of predicting it correctly. Because they're still following the people in the Treasury Department, the people in the Fed. They have never gotten anything right. They have been consistently wrong for years. Yet despite that, people in Washington keep following their advice, like it's the gospel. It's completely wrong. So hopefully if I can go there, I can change their minds and turn this thing around. And also I think we need people coming to Washington who are not politicians, whose goal is not to get reelected. I don't think that anybody who's going to Washington to get reelected is going to solve these problems. Because the minute they get there, they do what it takes to get reelected, and that means sweeping the problems under the rug. That means trying to find some kind of Band-Aid so you can get to the next election. But we can't do that. Right? We have to understand that the stimulus, the economic stimulus, is why the country is sick. Because that stimulus is toxic. That stimulus prevents the market from functioning. If the government had done nothing, right, in this 2008 crisis, if they had sat back and did what I said, if we had let AIG fail, if we'd have let a number of other major firms, probably Citigroup would have failed, and Morgan Stanley and maybe Goldman would have failed, a number of